Welcome to the Raw Spotlight podcast, where we feature inspiring leaders in the B2B space and share their unique stories. Let's get started with the show.
Welcome to the Ops Series. I'm Stephanie Rodriguez, your host, bringing you conversations with brilliant minds driving the engine of every successful organization, operations leaders. Together, we'll explore the journeys, uncover their strategies, and celebrate the pivotal role that operations plays in making it all happen. Now, whether you're an aspiring operations leader like myself, a seasoned pro, or just curious about what makes the businesses tick, this is the place for you. So let's get ready to dive into their stories and their insights and the expertise that define this Ops Series. So this episode is brought to you by Ready Artwork, where we deliver uniquely tailored B2B digital marketing services to facilitate long-term growth of your businesses. At Ready Artwork, we combine data-driven insights with innovative design to help your business thrive in the digital age. From SEO and digital advertising to web development and email marketing, we have experts who help companies uncover growth in unexplored and extraordinary ways. So to learn more, visit readyartwork.com, or better yet, get a free proposal. Let Ready Artwork discover your full potential. So before I introduce our guest, I did want to give a big thank you to Chad Franzen. He's also from Rise25, but he thought, Dr. Jeremy would be an ideal first guest to our podcast, specifically surrounding this operations topic. So thank you, Chad. And now, Dr. Jeremy Weisz, I'd love to introduce you. So you are the co-founder of Rise25.com, where your mission is to make the world a smaller place by creating meaningful connections. So since 2008, you at Rise25 have been helping organizations launch and run podcasts to connect with their ideal prospects and referral partners and collaborators. Yeah, here at Ready Artwork, we have actually had the pleasure of using Rise25 services, and I can personally say that you've been instrumental in helping us strengthen our connections and creating opportunities for growth. So thank you for that. Not only that, you are, Jeremy, also a pioneer in the podcasting world. So you've been hosting Inspired Insiders since 2010. You've interviewed top entrepreneurs, including the founders of P90X, Atari, Einstein Bagels, and RX Bars. And Jeremy, your passion for using podcasting to build relationships and drive results is truly unmatched. So welcome to the Ops Series. It's an honor to have you here.
Stephanie, thanks for having me. I kind of geek out on this ops stuff, so I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Yeah. So, what's top of mind for you? I'd love to hear more about Rise25 as well.
Yeah. I'll tell you a little bit about what's top of mind. And so I have a weird background. My background's in biochemistry and as a chiropractor. And in chiropractic school, Stephanie, they don't teach you marketing and business and things like that. So since I have my own practice, I had to quickly learn those things. And so I went out to different conferences, and this was back in 2006-07, and I stumbled across this thing. At the time, people weren't really calling it podcasting. It was more like just kind of doing online interviews, and I really took to it because it incorporated everything that I love, which is building relationships, content, professional development. So I got to learn from some of the top people in the industry. And then I started doing it. And by accident, that turned into a separate business. So people started coming to me asking, hey, can you help me launch and run my podcast? And keep in mind, I had a full chiropractic business I was running.
Wow.
And eventually I exited the chiropractic business and basically just focus all the time and energy on Rise25. So we help launch and run podcasts. So since this is the operations kind of series, I always think, in the beginning, I was kind of like pulling my hair out, doing everything. Right. And so I kind of think in like an operation mindset, like, okay, and I like to be consistent. I've done 2 to 3 episodes a week for over a decade on my podcast, Inspired Insider. And in the beginning, I was doing everything. And it was like midnight, right? The night before. And I'm like, I got to get this out the door. I'm staying consistent. And I was diligent, but I was doing everything. So I had to really, I try and do this for every part of my life, is create a system so that I can be in my zone of genius. right? Whether it's a health thing, whether it's a business thing, whatever it is, I try and create a system for it, so that I can focus on what I love, right? And so that's what I started to do. And I started to create a system, and then other companies started asking me to help them with that system. So the stuff that's always top of mind for me, is this is going to sound not sexy at all, but is SOPs, standard operating procedures. I think of that, unfortunately, on a hourly basis, and I feel like sometimes I'm in the SOP police, to make sure, do we have an SOP for it, and if we do, is it up to date, and are people following it? Is it in the place where it makes it easy for people to follow it? So, some of the tools, I know we were talking this before we hit record, that I love when it comes to operational things, is Sweet Process. We use Sweet Process for documenting our SOPs and keeping them in a centralized database. Before I found, again, like because we were so organized, it was fine. We would have a spreadsheet with like a link to each of the SOPs and like a Google spreadsheet, but people couldn't find them. It wasn't easy to create them. So we were like, okay, what's a better solution? And we found Sweet Process, which is amazing. And so that's a major piece of like helping to keep the team on track and make sure that we have everything documented. Another one is a Text Expander. Text Expander is the best $3 I spend every month. Okay. Text Expander, if you look it up, it's a desktop app that it allows you to do a short code. So, and then it automatically spits out whatever you have in that from that short code that's saved. So, for instance, I make maybe 3 to 20 introductions a day to people. All right. So, like you, I know a bunch of amazing potential guests for you. I'll mention Adi Clevitt is amazing. She's all about systems and operations, and I had her on my podcast. But like when I introduce, if you want, of course, I always do a double opt-in intro, so it makes it even longer. So Stephanie, I'll send a D's bio to you, and then if you say yes, I will connect the two of you and send your bio and her bio, so you both have it.
Wow.
If I did that for 10 people a day, it would take me 4 hours. Okay, but what I do is I save your first and last name in one word, intro and first and last name, so that when I type your name in, it spits out your bio. So like if I'm interested to a D, it will take me 5 seconds. I just type in intro Adi Clevitt. I've already saved it. Once I make an intro, I save it in the, and I ask people, hey, can you send me a bio? So I don't have to like do as much work. But so I use Text Expander a lot for that. Our customer support team uses it. So like Stephanie, let's say you ask, hey, like, how do I find, this, I guess a question, what would you ask? How do I find this in the dashboard? We've probably created a Rise25 University out of it. And then
Wow.
they know to type in, let's say software and tools. And then it spits out an email with the link to that software and tools video that we did. So our customer support uses it as well. And then they can fill in the blank. So you use Text Expander, Sweet Process, we use ClickUp from a project management standpoint. That allows everything to be documented. But then each ClickUp task has a Sweet Process link to it. So like, that's how we know it's being followed. They have to check off the task, but they have to, pull up the Sweet Process link. So it's like, hey, I need you to write a title for Stephanie's podcast episode. It will assign it to someone, and then it will have the corresponding Sweet Process link. So if so they can check off to make sure all the steps are done. So those are a few of the tool software. I use LastPass as well from like a systems
Love LastPass.
perspective.
Yeah.
If anyone gets annoyed and you're finding yourself going to websites and spending half your day trying to find passwords, well, LastPass helps with that. I use SaneBox for my inbox, which automatically kind of categorizes things. So there's a number of things I use like on a daily basis that if it shut down, I'd be like, want to crawl up in a corner,
Wow, that's great. That was actually one of the questions. I'm so glad you shared that. It's important to have the right systems in place so that your company, your organizations can scale and the improve in efficiency overall. So I really appreciate that you shared the tools and even the day-to-day items that you use with your team to make sure everything runs smoothly. So that's great. So let's kind of focus a little bit more about your team. So one thing I found challenging is, balancing the big picture goals of as a project manager, our projects, with also the details that need to be managed daily. So as COO, Jeremy, how do you manage that balance at Rise25 while making sure your team is aligned?
That's a really good question. Because people are in their individual positions, kind of doing um, the very kind of fine details.
Hmm.
And so one thing that we'll do is we do a monthly meeting with the whole team, and we share what's going on across the company. Okay. And then we have each month had one like person from different teams. Like we have an audio video team, a writer editor team, a developer team. Since we go in, we post, we do everything, post the podcast episodes on someone's website. We have a project management team, a customer support team. So we'd have one person come in, one just sharing overall kind of the mission and goals of the company. Because, for us, it's creating life change. It's not even producing podcasts, right? We consider ourselves to produce life changing relationships. And
Right.
so we want to make sure that when someone is editing a video and putting it on YouTube, like they're helping that person create life changing relationships. If someone is editing a blog post that's going to be part of the podcast, they're helping people create life changing relationships. And also, we are very or trying to be very meticulous, and there's a lot of SOPs around people's names, the spelling of their names, spelling of their company, because that could also hurt relationships. Like, some people are laid back about it, but we do take it very seriously. Like if we did, put your name as like Stephanie, and you entered it into the form as FF, we would not be happy about that. And we'd go back to the SOP, the sweet process. Like, did you check that she entered this in? But
Wow.
those little things, each department and those details make or break. And I think we try and just demonstrate the importance of every person's job. Like every person's job is important. And if one thing falls through the cracks, that goes back to the mission of we want to just have that person foster life-changing relationships. So we have that monthly meeting where we do share the talk about kind of just every time we talk about our ultimate mission and like what we're about. We're not just producing podcasts. And we do share kind of the wins across different departments because people aren't even aware. Like it's to me, I see all of it because I talk to each department, but
Hmm.
someone who's just doing audio video is not really communicating as much with the other groups, right? They may have their own daily stand up that's for that department, but they're not like necessarily meeting with different team members every single day. So that's one thing, just having that monthly meeting. We do have a daily stand up that is for across multiple departments so that people are, if people are familiar with the kind of the stand up daily stand up model, what are you doing today? What'd you do yesterday? What's getting in the way? And so it's, I think typically in the morning we have maybe 15 to 20 people on there and it takes, 15 minutes, right? Everyone just is, it's rapid fire. Maybe people are talking for 60 minutes, 60 seconds, and it may be just more focused on what's getting in the way. So to attack the day first. So people are aware of kind of what's going on across the different departments in the company too, as far as that goes.
Now that's interesting because we do that as well. Well, we used to have daily stand-ups, and we've just been hearing a lot of feedback of, are they necessary, right? Or can we cut back? Can we make it more of a just a digital touch point? Is Slack message just asking everybody to poll, what are you working on today? What are you working on tomorrow? What didn't get done yesterday? But I do think the daily stand up with the team, if it's more of like a meeting like this, it's great to also just get that face to face. And again, building that connection with your team, making sure that vision is aligned. So, I do like your approach to that. It's great.
I
Um,
mean, if there's nothing getting in the way, it could
yeah,
be quicker, right? So
right, right.
like, and I love it because as like a systems person, I want people to have everything they need for that day to get what they need. And so even if no one has anything, nothing's getting in the way, then fine. The meeting's super short,
Mhm.
but it is a part of the process that every day. And some days it's like, oh God, thank God we had this meeting because there's a bunch of stuff someone needed and they would have to wait for it possibly or try and get a hold of someone. So I like that as a process.
Yeah, and you're not really solely just relying on having the team reach out because sometimes there isn't that proactiveness that you encourage, but having that meeting is really just getting them to do it. So it's
Yeah.
yeah,
And part of the system of our daily stand up because some, like you said, sometimes people don't reach out, some people don't want to speak up. So after each person reports on, okay, this is what I did yesterday, this is what I'm doing today, this was if anything's getting in the way, they have to say there's nothing else I need. And if the person doesn't say, oh, there's nothing else I need, the person
right.
who's leading the meeting says, is there anything else you need from anyone here now? Or is anything getting in the way? So we want to make sure there's just that, you know, all personalities are you're, addressed and open to sharing.
Right. And when they do confirm, oh, there's nothing out of the way, and you come to find out later there is, it is also making sure that the accountability is there as well with our team members, right? And therefore producing high performing team members at the end of the day. So, yeah. So I love that you shared that, how you balance the vision and the details. I think that's great. You talked more about the team, right? Different types of personalities. So we try to build, strong teams here at Ready Artwork. And now you at Rice 25, I would love to learn like what types of strategies have you found are most effective in fostering that collaborative and accountability within your team at your company.
Yeah. I mean, so accountability, I'll kind of break those separately for a second.
Sure.
Collaboration and accountability. So we maybe have Stephanie a lot of meetings. Um, but our meetings are not to talk about always to talk about what we need to do. Our meetings are to do things,
Yeah.
right? So I know we've had people come in and be like, "Oh my God, there's a lot of meetings," and then once they realize, like, "Oh, this is time I can get my work done," right? Because I've been in worked with companies where, okay, after like I was in meetings all the time and I didn't get anything done. But most of the purpose of our meetings is to get stuff done on that meeting, so the team can be like, okay, they look forward to it because this is a space where they can get stuff done. And we do
Mhm.
this with our clients too, right? So we set outreach strategy meetings. Outreach strategy meetings are there so that you can reach out to the people that you know you need to reach out to. Like you're like, oh my God, Jeremy mentioned a D. I need to reach out to her. He mentioned this sweet process. I need to talk to Owen from Sweet Process. Well, you're right after this. You probably have 20 other things that you need to do,
Mhm.
and you're not going to get to it. So the point of the outreach strategy meeting is to get on and be like, okay, who did I not contact this week that I was supposed to text or email, and then do it. And I say that because I have 3 times a week a meeting with, and John and I both do together with our strategists, and we're on there sending messages out. We're texting people, we're emailing people that we need to email. And so there's a lot of accountability because I have to show up. And now we use Active Campaign as a CRM. So like we have one person leading it and they're going through the CRM and say, hey, like, did you thank Stephanie for having you on the podcast? Or, like that will go
Yeah.
into the CRM. And so I am held accountable and then we send a future task for it. Right. So not only is there a present, then it's like, okay, Stephanie's amazing. You have to make sure to check in with her in like 4 months to see how the podcast is going, see what introductions we can make. So it's always in a give fashion. And so
Mhm.
we'll literally set a follow-up task. And since we have the meeting 3 times a week, we'll just cycle through any tasks that need to be reach outs that we need to do that day. That's just one example. But so we have a lot of meetings that we're doing stuff, and there's multiple people on the meeting doing stuff. Because if I let's say set a calendar um event on my calendar,
Mhm.
right? And no one is showing up except for me, guess what I'm going to do? I'm probably going to be like, oh, I have a million other things to do and I'm going to skip it. Right. So there's always multiple people on that meeting. And so I show up. I mean, today it happened. I'm like, oh my God, I have so many things to do. And I get on there and I'm like, okay, I was happy I did. I kind of compare it to personal training, right? Like someone could go work out. Do they know how to work out? Yes. But
Mhm.
when I go to my personal trainer, who's amazing, um, she basically holds me accountable. She pushes me. She gives me different things to do. And sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I'm so tired. It's cold in Chicago. I want to like just crawl up and not go outside. And she forces me to do it, which I enjoy. So the accountability is we have a lot of different meetings, but they're to get stuff done. And the collaboration is actually very similar because since we are doing a lot of meetings, right? And we always set follow-up meetings to make sure we get stuff done. And so there is that collaboration. We will invite other people from different, maybe it's not something they're working on necessarily, but so we'll invite other people on the meetings just so they can hop in and kind of hear, maybe they're adjacent to it. Maybe it's a customer support person and we will have them come in some of these meetings just so they're aware of some of the behind the scenes they're going on that they may not be privy to because they're not in those specific meetings. So we'll basically have people join so that they can add new ideas and also just be aware and collaborate.
Yeah, I think I find it too when we have a diverse group of teams join our meetings. We do hear, innovative ideas from different perspectives. So, I hear you on that part of if it's just someone who maybe not is more adjacent to this project or the specific topic for the meeting, it's still good to have them in there because they might bring in a new, fresh perspective that we aren't already thinking about, especially working on something already that the team has been spending time on. We're so focused in on what we've been working on, sometimes having an outside look in is able to share with us some of those things that we just didn't think about. Yeah.
And Stephanie, we use Slack as well. So I say that because before people were using email like early on. That's a nightmare,
Mm.
right? Because it's a one-to-one communication, it's not collaborative at all.
No,
And
I don't know.
so we quickly switched to Slack. And and it's part of one of our SOPs, like how we use Slack. Like if someone comes on board, they have to read the sweet process on how we use Slack.
Mm.
Because if they send me a one-on-one, like a direct message, it better be something like, okay, like maybe someone's like, listen, I have some personal matter that I don't want to share. That's fine. But if they send something that's like about a project, I'm like, please put this in this. And we have different Slack channels for different things so that everyone can see it.
Yeah.
It's not specific to me. We want everyone to see it because other people will chime in before I even see it. Right. So
Yes.
Slack helps us be more collaborative as well.
Yeah, it's great. We use that tool specifically in that scenario too. We also apply that whenever there's a project or a team. We try to make sure everyone's informed. So it shouldn't be a one-to-one because at the same time of having a larger team, you don't want knowledge to be just stopped at one person. You want the knowledge to feed throughout the rest of the team so everyone can be collaborative and informed and, making the right decisions.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And
it's
it needs
great.
to be policed because people will literally send direct messages. I'm like,
Yeah.
don't send direct messages. Put
Right.
it in a public channel.
And then it's a game of telephone. Well, this is what so and so said, and no, 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 this is what they said. So let's just all put it out in the open with everyone to see. So it's great. It's a great tool. Okay, so I love what you've been sharing with, operations, the tools again that you've been using at Rise25. And it's great to know that our team at Ready Artwork is also having similar strategies and tools. It's reassuring for us. But I also want to, go a little bit more on the other end of Rise25. I want to learn more about your clients. So I worked on projects where building the right partnerships, it's very crucial, but I know operations plays a huge role in making those connections sustainable. So how does Rise25 focus on connecting with businesses and their Dream 200 clients? So, and then, what operation strategies do you use to make those partnerships effective?
Yeah, that's a good question. So our process, right? So I talk about there's 5 steps to profit with a podcast. All right. And so the first step is to create a Dream 200, right? And this is obviously we've done this with you guys where
Yeah.
there's like we create there's over 17 categories that we brainstorm under for that Dream 200. And some people think of Dream 200 as clients only. We think of it
Okay.
as partnerships, clients, big authorities in the space, anyone in the ecosystem, right? And so that's where we start, and that's kind of the foundational piece, right? And so, for example, let's say, there's, you focus in on B2B SaaS, right? There's different categories that we brainstorm under that Dream 200 from a B2B SaaS perspective or whatever it is, right? And so there's a whole system under each of these steps. So, but that's the first one kind of when I'm thinking broad is create that Dream 200. An example of like, a let's just say it could be a client, it could be a potential client, it could be a referral partner. If we're talking B2B SaaS or whatever it is, you could pick your poison. One of the things from a partnership perspective would be looking at conferences in the space, right? And so that's just one topic under one piece of the Dream 200. So if I'm thinking of, okay, what are some of the top B2B SaaS conferences out there that would be great for kind of partnerships and people in the ecosystem, right? So that would be one example. The number 2 thing is you getting ROI with outreach, right?
Mm.
Nothing happens until we reach out to someone, right? And we were talking about this before we hit record. I like reaching out to people to give to them and not ask for them, not ask for anything. I'm not reaching out to people saying, can I do a demo? Can I share what we do? It's nothing, usually never about me. It's more of, Stephanie, let's brainstorm in what COOs or directors of operation would be great for you, right? And so my outreach is more, and that's why I love having a podcast because my outreach is, do you want to come on the show? Which is a give. I can profile them. I get to share with the world what they're working on. Obviously, we create a video on it, audio, a full blog post. We'll push it on social. So ROI with outreach is like reaching out, and that reach out, it has to be a give in my mind. A give is like inviting them on the podcast or just exploring.
Mhm.
If you don't have a podcast, exploring what they do and how I can help them, right? And so that's the outreach part. And there's different best practices we have around outreach, right? It goes back into kind of the fundamentals of copywriting too. You and I have probably both gotten terrible outreach messages on LinkedIn or
Yeah,
another platform. It's like people
definitely.
spewed like all their like, I don't get it. Do they not realize like no one's responding to these messages?
Right. Very
They needed
generic.
I need a different approach. It's like they just spew out all the services they do. One, I didn't ask about their services, and it's not a give, and it doesn't have those fundamental pieces, right? They probably didn't look at anything that we do.
Hmm.
So the second step after create the Dream 200 is outreach and best practices. The third, from the podcast standpoint, is kind of the art and science of producing amazing content, right? And that comes into, and obviously under that, we talk about technology setup, and people always ask, what tools do I use? I mean, for me, I keep it very simple, right?
Hmm.
Which is a USB mic, like you're seeing this. This is, I don't know, 10 years old. It's a Blue Yeti. I mean, you get one for $150 or whatever it is. And you just use whatever you use to record, right? So you could use Zoom, you can use Google Meet, you can use Microsoft. It doesn't matter to me, right? Um, People get caught up on the technology thing, but like really the foundational pieces are creating that Dream 200, which is when we're working with someone, we build out the full strategy, the outreach, and the art and science of producing amazing content. We did talk before we hit record here. The best content helps people and allows them to tell stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's memorable, right? So like you mentioned in the beginning of the interview, I had the founder of Atari. He also founded Chuck E. Cheese. He was one of Steve Jobs' mentor. So I found out that Steve Jobs offered him, Nolan Bushnell is the person. He offered Nolan Bushnell, Steve Jobs did, 33% of Apple for $50,000. Okay. And I was like, I knew there was a good story behind it. And so I asked Nolan on the podcast, Nolan, what happened? Like I don't know how many billion, maybe be the richest person in the world. I don't know if that happened. And so he kind of said, you could listen to the episode on Inspired Insider, but he had a lot of amazing stories about Steve Jobs and founding these companies. But he's like, Jeremy, if a punk 21, I don't know how old Steve Jobs was at the time, but if a punk 21-year-old came up to you and said, and he goes, at that time, the 50,000 was probably more like 300 to 400,000. He's like, if
Right.
a punk kid who's 21 asks you for $400,000, what would you say? And you don't know this is going to be the next, the Apple, like of what it turned out to be. So I go, point taken, right? But opening it up so someone can tell great stories and lessons.
Yeah.
And the fourth is build your give loop through, and grow your reach. That means after you produce an episode, you're publishing it, right? So like after this, we're going to produce an amazing thing, and I'm going to share it all over my LinkedIn.
Awesome.
And I'm going to share it with people who I think should check it out. And so by that nature, and I have over, I think almost close to 18,000 followers on LinkedIn, by nature, your episode will reach those people. Not
Mm-hmm.
all of them, obviously, but like it'll reach a number of people who've never heard of your company, never heard of the podcast, just because I have that reach. And it's not about quantity, right? It's more about quality. There's, obviously my network is different founders, CEOs, entrepreneurs, which is exactly who you want to get in front of. And the last is turn your podcast into profits, which is like turn your guests into partners, right? And
Mm-hmm.
obviously, since you have a show, it allows me very easily to recommend people to you without qualifying them. Like, I don't know if they need your services, but I don't care because you have a cool show, you have great people on it, and I can, introduce them to you. So those are the kind of the 5 steps. And there's kind of like, as I mentioned, I just touched on a few systems under each of them. But that's how I think of the podcast.
Wow. Yeah. So you definitely have your system just thought out through and through. And I think that's amazing. I did want to talk a little bit more about how you approach tailoring, this to your clients. So like I mentioned, Ready Artwork is a client of yours. And I mean, from the beginning of the relationship, it's just been so smooth. It's been very positive from all of the team members here. So I know you do work in different industries. So how do you try to, from an operation standpoint, customize this to meet your unique needs for your clients?
Yeah. I mean, put it this way, Stephanie. So like every question we've gotten,
Mhm.
right, over the years, we either produce a Rise25 University
Yeah.
out of it, so only share with our clients, or we've produced a podcast episode on it, right? So no matter what question, and what I have found is honestly, it doesn't matter like the industry specifically, it's all the same concept, right? And so we can then get tailored when we do the strategy and everything, we tailor it to that specific um industry or company, but the system is the same. You know what I mean? So like for you, I know you help a lot of, like water utility companies, you help luxury food companies, You help local transit companies, exotic food companies. So like when we are looking at luxury food companies, that was a fun one to actually explore. But it's the same as if it's luxury food. I mean, you help a lot of different types of companies, just your company, right?
Yeah.
So when we're talking water utility and luxury food,
Totally
and
different.
way different. But
Yeah.
if we're looking at a system, meaning like, okay, what are some cool conferences in luxury? Now, those are more exciting in the luxury food space. Like you have the fancy
Hmm.
food show, you have, there's, I think, a couple different fancy food shows, maybe
Yeah.
one in San Francisco, one in New York. But if you're
A
talking
lot of
about
taste
like,
testing. It's great.
yeah, like,
Yeah.
but it's more of when we go back to the Dream 200 from a systems perspective, it's okay, who are some conferences in the space that would be good for partnerships or things? So we can apply that to fill in the blank. Luxury food, we can, like I said, I don't know what conferences, I'm sure there are on the water utility company staff. There's probably conference out there, right? And how many people are really in your arena going to water utility conferences? Probably not many, which is, I love the non-sexy niches because there aren't many people like really playing in that space. Like when we're talking about luxury food or SaaS, there's probably more popular. But so that's how we apply just the concept
Hmm.
to any company that we work with. Now, we don't do comedy podcasts or true crime podcasts. So part of it is saying no to
Right.
certain things because it doesn't apply to our methodology, right? If you're like, hey, I want to do this true crime podcast, I'm like, that doesn't fit at all. And so that's not a good client for us. So it's sometimes saying no. Someone was like, Jeremy, I have this idea for a sports podcast. And I'm like, that doesn't follow our methodology. And it's really hard to gain when people are thinking of it as gaining an audience and sponsorship as opposed to someone who actually has a business and they're using it to really build amazing relationships and content.
Yeah, I think that's a keynote there that you mentioned, saying no to clients that aren't the right fit, maybe aren't the right methodology that we have. I mean, I think that's what we're also trying to do here at Ready Artwork, because at the end of the day, you want to make sure that your client is satisfied. And so with the systems that you have in place, it's going to make sure that at the end of the day, they are. So speaking of clients, I know we're almost at time, but I wanted to ask you, you do mention you do a lot of research on your podcast guests and you pull out information from them, stories, things like that. But I wanted to see if there's anyone that you wanted to highlight that you've learned lessons from. I know before we hit record, you did mention the In Your Face podcast.
Yes. Yeah. So there's a couple I'll mention. One, so Craig Weisz, amazing entrepreneur. And I forgot how we actually met. I think John Corcoran, my business partner, met him. And so we had him on the podcast, of course. And they were interested in doing a podcast. And they were kind of skeptical at first because they have kind of like an innovative model called Retainer Club. So they help orthodontists so they don't have to produce the retainers. It's kind of like a Dollar Shave Club for retainers. So like if they want to replace it, they just call, message Retainer Club and they'll do all the fulfillment and everything. So they don't have to deal with, they can do the big projects like the braces, but the retainer part, they kind of have Retainer Club.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's like, okay, when we first did the strategy and the blueprint, which is the foundational piece, we were brainstorming, and he said, there was this group that was interested, and this person basically kind of went dark and this is obviously anyone listening, this is not uncommon, right? You have
Yeah.
people you're communicating with, they go dark. It's not like they hate you or anything. It's just
Right.
like they get busy. So it could be a month, 3 months, 6 months. So it'd been over 6 months. The person, he'd sent, I think, multiple messages, and the
Mm-hmm.
person did not respond to any of them. And it wasn't, I don't remember what the messages were, probably like just touching base. But when we sent the message to say, not shockingly, hey, I'd love to have you on the show, or like talk about who in your group may be a good fit. I think within around 10 minutes, the person responded and said, Oh, that's great. I love, they respond to this. It's just, again, goes back to the fundamental principle that we think about is giving, like
Yeah.
what's a give. And the person responded. And by the way, they responded and said, actually, I do have a referral for you. And not for the podcast, actually for their company. And so they just became top of mind. And that person referred that ended up being over $100,000 of recurring revenue for. This is, by the way, before they launched the podcast, before they recorded their first episode.
Wow.
So I always say, when we're doing the strategy and the outreach and things, it is very possible that people can get ROI before even launching the podcast. This kind of causes a disconnect because they think, oh, wait, I need to have it live or I need to get downloads or subscribers. But it's really just building on current relationships and building new relationships. So that was an interesting, again, it just goes back to reaching out to the people and trying to give to them in that way.
Yeah.
So that was a good example. I did a top giver series because this is kind of fundamentally how I think about Stephanie. When I have someone on my podcast, okay, this is going to sound weird. My
I'm
goal
ready.
is not to get them as a client. My goal is not to get them as a referral partner. Actually, my goal is to get them a client or to get them a referral partner. Okay. That's my goal. It's to give to them. So now, obviously, if we're having the right people on, we build relationships who are partners.
Hmm.
We like to do business with our friends and colleagues, but my goal is actually to get them a partner or them a client. And then I have that episode that I can share with my network. So some of the I did a giver series with some of the top people I consider amazing givers. Brian Kurtz, he wrote the book Over Deliver. Ian Garlic. So I basically kind of compiled this list. I had Joey Coleman. I don't know if you've heard of Joey Coleman's book. He's got a couple books out actually, and it's Never Lose a Customer Again and Never Lose an Employee Again. So
Oh my gosh.
he
I
was.
love that.
Have you heard those
Yeah,
before?
I actually
Yeah.
watched a video of him talking through Never Lose a Client
Yeah.
again, and we've been applying it here. I mean, the client experience at the end of the day, right, is just like the most important thing from even before signing their contract. So I think it's a great resources for agencies, companies, anything like that to be using his tools and resources that are available. Yeah.
Yeah. So those are a few that you know, I always like to learn from givers, like how I can be better. And so
Right.
those are a few I had on that series, among others.
Yeah. That's great. And, I know we're at time. We're able to dive into the operations, a little bit more about Rise25, how you apply your systems and your tools and everything to try to make sure that, your company is running smoothly. So I think it's been a really amazing hearing from you. But before we go, I do have one last question. But I do want to point people to your website, right? www.rise25.com. And so they can go and learn more about what you do because it's amazing. And eventually, hopefully, join as part of your clientele. So the last question is, someone like me who is an aspiring operations leader, I would like to know what's one piece of advice you'd give me to lead in operations?
Yeah. So I go back to Stephanie 80/20 principle. I actually had Perry Marshall on my show, Inspired Insider. He wrote 80/20 Sales and Marketing. He learned from Richard Koch, who has 80/20 books. So like I think of 80/20 and what's the 20% that's going to lead to 80% of the results and focus my energy there,
Yeah.
right?
What's
Because there's a
most
lot
impactful?
we can do, but not necessarily we should do. And
Right.
so I am thinking on a hourly basis on 80/20. What are the 20, like for instance, what are the 20% of tasks I need to get off my plate to get 80% of my time back, right?
Hmm.
So I'm always thinking in this 80/20 mindset. So hopefully that's helpful. That's kind
Yeah.
of my foundation for anything.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's what can be the most impactful, right? working smarter, not harder necessarily too.
Yep, exactly.
Awesome. Okay, so thank you for your time. Again, you guys can check out more from Dr. Jeremy on referral.com. Thank you for having or being our guest.
Thanks, Stephanie. This rocked. Appreciate
Awesome.
it.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Raw Spotlight podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.